What are my thoughts on S risks, or risks of astronomical suffering, and Pascal's wager type arguments? For any rational agent, increasing the expected value of their eternity is the single most important thing they should dedicate their lives to. For negative utilitarians, this is reducing the risk of eternal hell. One hypothesis regarding our point in history is the hinge of history hypothesis, which is that this time period is uniquely influential, as evidenced by what appears to be an approaching technological singularity. However, all possible methods that could affect one's eternity have the potential to do so in both directions. They could both increase and decrease the likelihood of going to some sort of heaven or hell. One possible way to reduce S risks is to contribute in some way to AI alignment. However, this is not accessible to most people, and it's unclear that donating to AI alignment organizations will accomplish much. Another possible way to reduce S risks, or one's personal risk of eternal torture, is to do research on S risks and try to imagine as many possible scenarios that could lead to eternal torment in some form and map out their probabilities. However, this also has the risk of potentially exposing oneself to info hazards. Another possible way of increasing the expected value of one's eternity is to convert to whatever one believes has the highest likelihood of being the correct religion. However, there isn't a very principled way to assign probabilities to different religions being correct. One argument that has been made is that religions that have more followers have higher likelihood of being true. However, I don't see a good reason for this to be true. Religions that have followers are only an infinitely small fraction of all possible religions or religion-like systems that have the potential to be true and have potentially infinite consequences. For people who are religious, they are usually religious because of conformity. So if one believes that a religion having more followers is evidence of that religion being true, that likely means that either A, that the followers of the religion are doing good epistemology that is simply inaccessible to you, or that true religions would necessarily spread. Any religion you pick still most likely has a very small probability of being true in absolute terms. Another possible way to reduce S risks is simply to try to spread good values. This could take the form of giving people in institutions one believes have good values more power, and likewise, people in institutions with bad values less power. However, this is potentially subject to the Waluigi effect. The Waluigi effect also applies to AI alignment. Ryan Tomasic believes that a slightly misaligned AI has higher likelihood of causing astronomical suffering than a completely random superintelligent AI. Another factor that could affect one's eternity is life versus death. One has the option of getting cryopreserved after death, and one has the option of committing suicide. Regardless, there is a not insignificant chance of there being an afterlife in some form. If one believes in expectation that a future where they are successfully reanimated from cryonics will most likely be good in expectation, it is rational to be cryopreserved. If an afterlife exists, we know nothing about it. So, an afterlife where you are not cryopreserved is an afterlife essentially rolled at random. However, cryonics has the potential to give you a much more optimized afterlife. However, this would not be the case if one believes that the future will not be good in expectation. If one believes that one could be exposed to hazards that could increase one's risk of eternal torment, committing suicide may be rational. This could be in the form of being exposed to info hazards that could negatively affect one's eternity that would be prevented from ever being spread through death. Or if one believes a technological singularity is imminent, that is inescapable, and that has a high probability of torturing oneself.